Actually, I've got one general question on TOC. I'm not very familiar with this, so it might be a very naive question. And then I have one question on the previous subject we had on this pricing strategy. So my first general question on TOC is, what would be the constraint, the major constraint on TOC implementation? Or in other words, have you ever failed in implementing TOC constraint approach?
Are you asking me personally?
No. Well, I mean, maybe you or anyone. Is there any bottleneck or any major difficulties that you encounter when trying to implement TOC approach?
I don't think that should be using the words such as bottleneck or constraints. It's a question of breaking out of the box and adapting, having the courage to have a mindset that is not mainstream, and so you'll spend the rest of your life explaining to everybody who doesn't speak your language these things, and having the courage to do it until you die, and just repeating it and talking about bottlenecks. And it's so it's not a capacity constraint as such, right? And because it's that, it's having to explain it to your employees, to your clients, to other people and stuff. One of the vicious circles is, as long as it remains marginal or not very often used, you're going to have to be explaining it to a lot of people, which is why it's nice to get people together like this so you realize you're not alone in the world to have read the goal and want to do something. I mean, 7.5 million copies are out there, right? So there are a lot of frustrated theory of constraints people that have never done it, okay? And they'd like, you've heard the number of times people say, I read the goal, I have to do it, but I don't know where to start, right? And that's, again, all the credit for what Oded and Yelena are doing. Often the trigger is just going to be to see that other normal human beings with 2 legs and 2 arms had the same problem that you did and decided to try. And what's I find comforting, at least in what I know of in my experience, but also what I hear, is that that's all it takes really, is to try, and it works. Okay, it's not something where there's a big failure rate of people who might have tried it. Okay, now that's the pink nice story. The problem is, of course, that because that environment is, I don't know if the word hostile is the right one, but it's corrosive with regards to these ideas. You can go away and management will change, and somebody came in and said, I've never read the goal, and this is the way I work, and that will dilute or kill a previous initiative. Okay, and it's true that one of the sad things is about the theory of constraints going on for so many decades now, is that a lot of fantastic stories stopped because there was change in management or a new context. Okay, so I don't know if I'm making sense in answering that. It's the constraint, if you want to use that word, is what's happening between your ears right now, right? Just do it. And if you're like many of us here, really viciously interested in making sure it lasts, keep an eye behind you years afterwards to make sure that there are not danger points and if there's no risk of evaporating. I mean, they realize that now, but unfortunately when they start working with me, it's for life, and they're not allowed to ever stop. So I have to keep an eye, and I keep an eye out when the new boss is coming, and I try to get to be in his office before he arrives and say, here we use the theory of constraints. The what? Yeah, let me tell you the story. Okay. Okay. Oded will give you another answer, and maybe Jean-Marc, who's been doing it for quite a while too.
It's a very, very important question, because people are asking us, are you using your own medicine? Yeah. So if you're talking about the theory of constraint, you're a system. What is your constraint? And yes, throughout the years, the whole of the development of the TOC was looking into what is the constraint, and before even identifying the constraint, what are the blockages? Because we had an outstanding software, and with in 1983 when we looked into the performance of the of creative output. Then we were about 300 strong people around the world with over 200 outstanding implementations in big companies. And then we found that when we're going to do the sales, it is as difficult to persuade the 201 as it was before. And so with all of this track record, why is it so difficult? There's no question that the value that was brought to the customers was unprecedented. And we looked into that, and we analyzed it, and came to the conclusion that, of course, it's what we think is determining the growth, on what we are going to maintain the growth. And maybe having a lot of reference sites and big names and so on, this is what is going to help to do that. And then we challenge it and we say, not necessarily. Software is not the answer. Software has to come together with consulting. I'm talking about 83. So, okay, so here we go. We develop a whole spiel about the training, and there's a set that is still in the legacy of 16 videos of the opt of the training. Outstanding videos about the training. And we looked after a while and we see it's still very difficult to sell, which basically is that we have something that is blocking us. So if we didn't use what the terminology of today, but today we'll say the company wants to grow. What we need is more orders. The market is there, there's no question, but we don't get enough orders, so we have a market constraint. That's where we focus. And we had nearly all of the elements of the puzzle in place except for the marketing. Okay? And Goldratt himself, before he retired in 1997 from managing the institute, he said, this is the last piece that is missing, and this is dealing with the market constraint. And the whole development from 97 to today, with the viable vision, with all of the further tools, all of them were in order to answer one constraint. But the real answer is to say, when you're saying what is the constraint of the TOC, you have to ask yourself, what is the system that we're talking about? What is, okay? If it was Goldratt, yes, Eli Goldratt was the leader, had a vision, and he wanted to achieve the spread out, okay? And he was focusing on that, and the viable vision and the strategy and the tactics, all of them were in this direction of working to that. If you will talk to the individual consultants, they may have their own different constraints. And some of the consultants in this room, you ask them and said, what is your constraint? They said, capacity. I don't have enough trained consultants to do the thing. The three gentlemen that are sitting in front of you, they are saying, in Japan, the constraint is TOC practitioners that can lead and help companies to achieve the type of results that we have seen here today. Okay? So we are going to sort of juggle between capacity constraint and sometimes market constraint and so on. From engineering point of view, from knowledge, and I hope that what you saw today with my overview and with some, padding today and tomorrow, you'll see knowledge-wise there is plenty of knowledge to achieve it. Okay? So in the end of the day, the constraint is per the person who is sitting on an organization and the person says, either I have a TOC organization, a TOC consulting or a TOC services, or I want my company to be on the TOC. And then you will find that each one of them is more dealing with the practicality of the obstacle, how to achieve it.
Jean-Marc, who will present tomorrow, has been implementing theory constraints in Procter & Gamble for 25 years. What's your opinion?
So just what I wanted to add is it's absolutely not a quiet journey for yourself when you get on with this. It's a long, 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 never-ending journey. Nothing is acquired forever. So every management change, every change will lead you to re-question this and make sure that people get it. And you need to have the patience to go through that, unfortunately. Now, the good thing is that, and I heard a couple of people say this earlier today in the presentation, like when you are on the TOC thinking, then you are sort of infected for life. It's a positive disease, but at the same time, you have to bear the consequences of that. And hopefully tomorrow you will hear some of those consequences I've personally gone through over that long life journey of TOC work. But it's a fascinating one. I mean, it's worth going through, I can tell you. So that's my own experience. So get going, try, as Philippe said, just get on, and learning and practicing is just the only way to improve yourself on that one.
I do apologize that we sound like a sect of, from time to time. And
it's just
there are several reasons why I'm so happy that today's like this, because another way of putting it is that the people who have this mindset of the theory constraints are circles in a square world, and they spend all their time sort of with a misfit with regards to people. And then the circles get together, I've got 20 of them here, and they say, yeah, you know, I've done this and that, and they can speak to somebody, another madman, right, from the sect. So that's part of the fun of these meetings, where they can compare their talk stories. Okay, so you ready to become a round in a square world and suffer for the rest of your life? Yeah? The problem is it works and it's quite fun. Yeah, it's that's the problem, really. Otherwise we would have given up a long time ago, yeah, I guess. Okay, are there other questions?
I was wondering, Oded, you came back twice or 3 times actually on the software that you had and that it gone, and I not sure I understand that, because now Johan is doing something, then we've seen the Dutch company has supported on the service side to build the software. We're in 2017, any company can redevelop any software you want, in Israel in particular. I don't get this thing with this constraint being the software development, which could help many of the practitioners to continue and lead the journey, and some of the spin-off, I would say, to make it worse, on the DDMRP seem to be aligning with SAP, Agilea, whoever, to develop a software which does roughly the same thing that the TOC is doing in buffer management. So could you explain why you are kind of dwelling on this a bit?
Yeah, I'll let Oded answer, don't worry. I spent, not far from here, 2 years in a cellar with a VAX 750 with Opt. I don't think we can be understood. It was 50 years ahead of its time. It did things like detailed scheduling to a second over a century in about 0.7 seconds. With finite scheduling, it's just unbelievable. And most of the demonstrations we did to people, they thought we were cheating. Okay, so yeah, we're hard to define. Be careful with regards to DDMRP and TOC replenishment solution, right? There is one element in all that which does not exist anywhere, and that Opt had at its heart, the Opt module, finite scheduling of a capacity constraint. DDMRP is based on excess capacity, and therefore the SDBR solution, right? and ops.
Without knowing one or the other, to be
Okay,
honest,
no, but
Philip, it's
the-
just I'm wondering why. What is it that takes that we cannot reproduce something close to it, which will help us to deploy?
I will let you answer, but it's something that's very close to my heart. The opt software did finite scheduling of bottlenecks to get to do the elevation right and to use every second of that properly. Okay, and that is a fairly complex algorithm for decision making and stuff. And it was really very strangely excellent at doing that. Okay. The problem, the sorts of problems you had with that kind of thing, it's giving such a beautiful toy to engineers, and they turn it, they start playing with it and doing this and that, and it gets out of hand. Okay, but for all the people, and we can have another debate about how many organizations have an internal constraint and how many have a market external constraint. But for all organizations that have internal constraints, you need something that will manage, schedule a bottleneck at finite capacity. Okay, this is not what DDMRP does. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why you have to watch out. And as I will try and explain tomorrow, the problem is with the fluctuations in demand. There is no definite answer to the question: is it am I in a market constraint situation or in an internal constraint situation? You can see what's happening with aeroplanes, right? We don't know how long it's going to last, but we've got we've got production constraints for apparently the 5 or 8 years to come. But a volcano might explode, and you'll go. So that's my take on that. But Oded knows more about this.
Well, basically, you said a part of what I would have said. Yeah, that's fine. Look, the opt was something unique. Okay, it appears in a part of the history, and it was based on its own algorithm. But the major issue was that where it came into a world that already believed in infinite capacity backward scheduling, okay, with the small MRP, MRP2, ERP, etc. There's a whole host of interest. Why not to have some module inside that will be very precise, combined with the fact that the whole concept of accepting that there is the singularity of the constraint. I'm in production. Do you want to tell me that one constraint or 7 bottlenecks, they dominate my environment? You don't know what you're talking about. So if you're talking about how many people in production in the world are willing to stand up and to say, I have a bottleneck, and through managing the bottleneck, I can strive, I can succeed about it. How many people are like that? Is it 0.001% of management of production? And because of that, the software people are not interested to develop something like the opt. To say, yes, in Israel there are very good people that can build it, but you don't have a business case for that. Goldratt did his PhD, came with the model, took his brother, which was outstanding a software person. They developed together with another guy. 3 guys developed what today would be considered to be an outstanding startup. Okay? But, yes, for that, then there was a need to do, as I said, the continuation needed to say, wait a minute, hold on with the software, go into the training, to the education, develop all of the other tools. While Goldratt was on this stage, yes, his partners did not like it. They kicked him out. I'm going back to 1986. Within a year, the company went bankrupt. was bought by a competitor that they have the APS, Advanced Planning System, and they killed it. It does not exist.
SAP is doing APP, Infor is doing scheduling workbench. These guys are doing. The leaders are doing advanced capacity.
Yes, but not with the constraint. Not with the constraint. This is a fact. Okay? Look, even with TOC, you saw some of the presentation. In the absence of the opt, okay, we're using simplified drum buffer rope. What is simplified? This is an imitation of MRP. Okay, we said you do not have a constraint, and if you have constraint, if you look on my material, is only injection 7, then you do some manipulation. That's it. Okay, but to optimize or not, to create a schedule of the constraint, and from the constraint to all of the non-constraint, going forward in time, backwards in time, predicting when you are going to finish production, when you were doing it on developing an aeroplane. Yes, this was outstanding, and there's no wonder that people like Philip and myself, we are longing for these days that we could have it, but it does not exist. Later on came disaster. We could imitate some part of it, okay? But this is it. It was like a meteor. It came into history, shined, died. Okay? Plus the fact that the core of it disappeared. Yes? There was a black box inside that. Okay.
Can I?
But I just say that we still were considering with some of the guys, maybe we can have OP 2.0. I'm too old for that, so.
Sorry, I'll add to that and take it to a second level. I'm not sure if everybody can follow after just the first day. One of the major problems of the theory constraints is not the constraints getting to work, getting to elevate, because that goes back to Stakhanovich reflexes of making proud work, getting the machines working all the time. Okay, that's the easy part. The difficult part is to subordinate, is to make sure that non-bottlenecks do not work to their full utilization, but according to the requirements of the constraint, okay? And learning not to work. That is the most difficult part of the theory of constraints, okay? And it comes up in its various forms all the time. I was the software engineer for OPT, doing the after-sales service for Bendix and all the other clients in France and Southern Europe at the time. And the problems that we were getting was something that Eli Goldratt talked about, which was greed. Don't be too greedy, okay? OPT, that module, did finite capacity scheduling of bottlenecks. And then it said, well, maybe if I put this machine also as a bottleneck, and this one, and in fact I have 4 different bottlenecks in my line, not one, and then the system would mathematically go mad trying to optimize 4 constraints. It's just a stupid thing to try and ask, right? So, as Oded rightly pointed out, understanding the inherent simplicity of accepting to have one constraint, and better still, to choose it. That is the way you should do it, right? And so far, many of these sophisticated tools that we've provided to people have been destroyed because, engineers just love making a mess of simple solutions.